What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, I wanted to give you guys 5 players that you should be picking up to add to your Dynasty Fantasy Football taxi squads after your rookie drafts are completed. I know some of you guys have already completed them. Some of you guys are already in them at the moment. So make sure you guys are tapped into this channel. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we got Dynasty Fantasy Football content coming year round. But like I said, today we're going to give you 5 players to get on those taxi squads. So without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's talk about those stashes. All right, so the first player that I want to talk about in today's video is going to be running back Jacory Croskey-Merritt from the Washington Commanders. Now, he was drafted round 7, pick 29 by those Commanders, but he was projected as a 5th round draft pick after the NFL Combine on NFL.com. Now, Croskey-Merritt, he didn't have much meaningful college tape outside of his 2023 season with the New Mexico Lobos, where he went for nearly 1,200 rushing yards in his 12 games played. The problem, and likely the reason why he fell in the 2024 class, was that after deciding to transfer to Arizona to play with Tetairoa McMillan in 2024, the NCAA sidelined him for almost the entire year due to eligibility concerns stemming back to his freshman year at Alabama State when they couldn't confirm whether or not he had redshirted. So despite returning to school that season, he wouldn't get to put much on tape there in 2024. Now that was until he got invited to the 2025 East vs. West Shrine Bowl, where he would end up impressing NFL scouts throughout the week and eventually winning the Offensive MVP award after rushing the ball for 11 times for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. Moving into the NFL, he lands on a depth chart that has some notable names in Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler, but JCM could very well impress enough to find a way into the rotation as a rookie for the Commanders. And even though he's a little bit of an older running back prospect at 24 years old, he is a quick processor and he does play with some nice explosiveness and quickness, and that's going to be a nice upgrade to this offense as a potential complementary piece to the tough, grinding running style of Brian Robinson Jr. and as Austin Eckler continues to age. Plus, with how high tempo this offense can get at times, they could lean on another playmaker to add alongside Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, and Deebo Samuel to keep splashing these big plays we got so accustomed to seeing last year. I truly do believe that JCM should be added as an undrafted free agent, if not being drafted in the later rounds of your rookie draft, simply due to the value that he could bring your roster if he does find his way into the rotation. This is a player that I've been targeting very heavily in my leagues, and I currently have him on over 75% of my dynasty rosters, so I'm putting my money where my mouth is here with JCM, and I think you guys should be picking him up too. Now, moving on to our next player, I want to talk about running back Tahj Brooks for the Cincinnati Bengals. He was drafted round 6, pick 17, but he was also projected as an earlier pick on NFL.com right after the Combine. He was projected to go about the 4th or the 5th round by Lance Zierlein. So Tahj, he is a super productive running back prospect coming out of Texas Tech, where he became the school record holder in rushing attempts and rushing yards over former Texas Tech running backs like Ricky Williams, James Gray, and DeAndre Washington. Now, along with his record-breaking years for the university, he also finished his college career with back-to-back 1,500-yard rushing seasons, and that landed him as the 4th best in the FBS in 2023 and the 8th best in the FBS in 2024, alongside some names like Omarion Hampton, RJ Harvey, Caleb Johnson, and some other running backs that were also drafted higher than him in this year's NFL draft. It just feels like Tahj Brooks is being a little bit overlooked in the NFL draft this year due to the depth at the position. Brooks has one of the better analytic profiles from an athleticism and a usage standpoint in this class, posting a collegiate dominator rating of 32%, a total touch share of 42% in 2024, which is comparable to guys like Omarion Hampton, Caleb Johnson, and Cam Scatabo, and he also posted the 6th best RAS score of any running back drafted in this year's class. He now goes to a Cincinnati Bengals offense that clearly is going to give Chase Brown as many opportunities as he can handle, but Tahj Brooks should have as good of a chance as anybody in this offense to earn a change of pace role behind Brown, especially with Zach Moss failing last year and guys like Samaje Perine and Gary Brightwell being the only other running backs in this backfield that are going to give him some competition. And I think the power in which Tahj Brooks runs with could make him a hard-nosed grinder in this offense behind the explosion of Brown, and could make him fantasy relevant over time as a flex play or a high-end handcuff to Chase Brown if anything were to happen to him in the injury department. I also think it's worth noting that he can be leaned on in the receiving game if needed, because he did show that he has the chops to do that at the college level. Even though he didn't do it a ton at the college level, he showed he was capable. And just like JCM, I think Brooks is a guy that I would actually be drafting in the later rounds of my rookie drafts, but I've seen him go undrafted in many of my leagues so far already, and I've prioritized him as a UDFA on my taxi squads as well. So if he's going undrafted in your leagues, I think you should be prioritizing him to your taxis and adding him just in the off chance that he carves out a role behind Chase Brown. Now you'll notice the first two players that I had on this list were running backs. I do prioritize running backs on my taxi squads as well as athletic tight ends. So I did make a post on X the other day of a bunch of late round options at the running back position. You'll see names on here like Jarquez Hunter, Devin Neal, DJ Giddens, Trevor Etienne. The list goes on and on. I think all of these guys are definitely going to be worthy of pickup. So if any of these players are undrafted in your leagues, make sure you prioritize them on the waiver wire and add them to your taxi squads, because I think throwing darts at the running back position this year is going to be much more beneficial and maybe much more profitable long term than picking some of these wide receivers. But I did mention that I also like some athletic tight ends. So the third player that we're going to be talking about today is going to be Oronde Gadsden II. He was the tight end that was drafted in the 5th round, pick 29 to the Los Angeles Chargers. And after playing his first 2 seasons at the University of Syracuse as a wide receiver, Gadsden would transition into a tight end as a junior. And this is interesting because in 2022, as a sophomore, he was nominated first team All-ACC and led the team with 61 receptions and set a school record of 969 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. So regardless of the wide receiver success that he had in 2022, he still transitioned to tight end, but unfortunately would have to redshirt his junior year after just 2 games due to a Lisfranc injury in his right foot. However, he would get back on track as a redshirt junior in 2024, finishing with 3rd team AP All-American and 1st team All-ACC honors, while also breaking both school and ACC records for tight ends with receptions. Gadsden's time as a wide receiver makes him interesting for fantasy football purposes because we're always looking for tight ends that can make an impact in the receiving game, and Gadsden has shown that he is more than capable of doing so despite still being fairly new to the position. He's a solid route runner for the position, he has a massive catch radius, and he plays with great focus and toughness, especially at the contested catch point, and he has the athletic profile that we want to see for the position, posting a better RAS score than guys like Harold Fannin Jr. and similar next-gen stats scores to guys like Terrence Ferguson, who were both drafted on day 2 of the NFL draft. Now there's obviously going to be some growing pains with Gadsden as he continues to develop into the tight end position, just being relatively new to it, and he may have to be taken off the field in blocking situations, which isn't ideal, but he goes to a depth chart here in Los Angeles with Tyler Conklin, who's on a 1-year deal, and Will Disley. Now neither of those guys are going to be impossible to keep off of the field, as Conklin is likely a good not great starter option for the Chargers, and Disley is more of a depth piece. So if Gadsden gets into camp and starts showing some of that receiving upside, the athleticism at the position, and some of the high upside traits that he possesses here as a tight end in the NFL, I do think he can slowly work his way into the rotation and maybe eventually be a fantasy football playable option, especially in those tight end premium leagues. Now, although I did say that I do prioritize the running backs over the wide receivers, especially in this year's class, there are a few wide receivers we should talk about. The first one and my 4th overall player is going to be Xavier Restrepo out of the University of Miami. He goes undrafted, but signed with the Tennessee Titans as a UDFA after the draft. And Restrepo is a surgical route runner and a hyper-productive slot wide receiver who had a very good career with the Miami Hurricanes. In fact, he is Miami's all-time receiving leader with 2,844 total yards over guys like Santana Moss, Reggie Wayne, and Michael Irving. Now, obviously, collegiate stats, they need to be taken with a grain of salt, but that should show how productive Restrepo was as a wide receiver and how he can translate to the next level. The biggest reason, in my opinion, why he went undrafted was due to a very poor 40-yard dash and speed score, which is definitely concerning, but it did seem to get a little bit overblown, especially considering how productive he was in college despite that lack of speed. The thing I like the most about Restrepo and why he should be taken on as a dart throw is because he goes to the Tennessee Titans to reunite with his college quarterback in Cam Ward, who reportedly called in, put in the word for Restrepo, and said that he wanted the Titans to go out and bring him back so they could reunite here at the NFL level. So of all of the players currently on the Titans roster, Restrepo is the guy that Cam Ward has the best chemistry with, and he's the only wide receiver on the roster that Cam Ward requested. And although that may not mean everything, it may mean something, and I do think it could show up early on in practices. This wide receiver depth chart does feel like it's very much unfinished, and they could lean into competition early on in practice to carve out the official rotation of guys here, especially considering that none of the names in the starting lineup right now, outside of maybe Calvin Ridley, feel like they will be around long term, and even Ridley does does feel questionable to me in the long-term department. So if you do want to take some dart throws on your taxi squad at the wide receiver position, I do think Xavier Restrepo is definitely somebody you can take a shot on, especially if you want to bet on the chemistry from college there at the University of Miami to roll over with Cam Ward here at the Tennessee Titans. And now my fifth and final player that I'm going to bring up, and I feel like you can't have this type of video without bringing up this name. It's going to be wide receiver Isaiah Bond, who is still undrafted and unsigned at this point in time. Obviously, that is because of the legal issues that he is currently battling at the moment. But I do think it's worth noting that Bonds was projected as a day 2 pick in the NFL draft, and he was receiving Jalen Waddle comps from very respected NFL analysts, and he was widely regarded as a top 10 wide receiver in this year's draft class. Now, obviously, if there weren't any legal issues with Bond, he wouldn't even be eligible for a video like this because he would be getting drafted in the 2nd and the 3rd rounds of your rookie drafts, depending on your league format and your league size. However, I have seen him go undrafted in a few of my leagues, and I have picked him up in a few of my leagues, so I wanted to make the case for him as a UDFA on your taxi squad. Now, there's no question that the allegations are serious with Bond, but pretending to know exactly how the legal process is going to pan out is probably a pretty silly game to play at this moment in time, especially with the uncertainty that the NFL has when it comes to discipline with this type of thing for wide receivers and other players in this league. Obviously, we know the NFL is not necessarily the most consistent with disciplinary action, and at his current UDFA cost, I think he's definitely worth the risk for fantasy football teams. Maybe not an NFL team right away, but I think fantasy football teams, he should be added immediately after your rookie drafts. And it is also worth noting that Bond has filed a federal complaint against his accuser for defamation and more, which only is going to further the messiness of this case. But Bond's upside is rare at this cost and is something that I'm willing to gamble on. He spent 3 years in the SEC at both Alabama and Texas, which should speak to the level of talent that Bond possesses despite not seeing a big statistical season at either school. But he has next level athleticism and could reach his full potential if he just saw a few more targets come his way. Now, like I said, we don't know exactly how the legal process is going to pan out, but if Bond comes out of this on the other side, it's hard to imagine that an NFL team won't take a shot on him. And if he finds his way onto a roster, he can start working his way up the depth chart pretty quickly just based off of the raw talent alone. At the end of the day, taxi squads are meant for high upside, athletic, dart throw type of players. And when you just look at Bond as the football player in this unique situation that he's in, and you don't look at the off the field stuff, or at least try to predict how the off the field stuff is going to be figured out, he ends up being one of the highest upside dart throws that we can probably throw at the wide receiver position here this year on our taxi squads. All right, folks, so there you have it. That's 5 players that I'm prioritizing to add as UDFAs onto my taxi squads after my rookie drafts. Maybe even more than 5 if you account for the list of running backs that I gave you in the middle of the episode. But if you found something in today's video informative, entertaining, actionable, you found a player that you're going to go pick up, make sure you do me the favor and support this channel by hitting the like button. Also, make sure that you guys are subscribed to this channel. That way you don't miss any of our future content. And last but not least, make sure you go join our free Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description, helping you guys with your Dynasty fantasy football teams 24/7, 365. And there's a dope community of people in there that want to talk fantasy football with you, play in leagues with you, help you guys with trades, do all that good stuff. So like I said, it's free to join. There is no risk in doing that. So make sure you go join that Discord. But with all that out of the way, I have nothing else for you today. I'll see you on our next video. Until then, peace out.